When I bought the old farmhouse in northern Pennsylvania, everyone in town told me the same thing. Don't stay there in winter. At first, I laughed it off, figured they meant the blizzards or the power outages. You know, small-town superstition dressed as friendly advice. But later, I realized they meant something else entirely. The place sat alone at the end of a dirt road, swallowed by birch trees and fog. The driveway was basically two ruts in the mud, and when I pulled up the first time, a crow was sitting on the mailbox, watching me, like it knew something I didn't. The house itself leaned a little to the left, like it had been trying to get away for a long time, but never quite managed it. The realtor, a middle-aged woman named Lorna, wouldn't even step past the front gate after sunset. She jingled the keys nervously in her hand and said, "You'll find the heating works, mostly, but don't try to fix the walls. Let them be." I laughed. Some kind of structural thing, I thought, but her face didn't move. Her eyes were glassy, like she was remembering something she didn't want to. Inside it smelled faintly of damp wood and something else, sweet and rotten at the same time, like apples left too long in the basement. The wallpaper was the strangest part. Every room had a different layer, peeling back to reveal another pattern underneath, florals over stripes, stripes over faded children's prints. Like someone had been trying to smother the house's history instead of repainting it. I moved in anyway. I'm not the superstitious type. The first night, I unpacked just enough to make the living room livable. An air mattress, a lamp, and my old laptop. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like breathing. The house creaked and settled. The radiator hissed like a slow leak. And then came the whispering. At first I thought it was the wind slipping through cracks, but the rhythm was too steady, too deliberate. It came from the walls, soft and hushed, almost conversational, like two people murmuring behind thin plaster. I tried turning up the heat to drown it out, but the whispers stopped only when I switched on the light. By morning, I found something new. In the hallway near the stairs, a section of wallpaper had peeled overnight, curling like burnt paper. Beneath it, scrawled directly on the plaster in faded charcoal, were the words, "Don't answer when they knock." I stared at it for a long time, trying to decide if it was some old joke, graffiti from a squatter maybe. But then I remembered something. I hadn't told anyone I'd moved in. Nobody knew I was there. That night, just before midnight, I heard footsteps on the porch, and then 3 soft, polite knocks on the front door. I didn't move at first. I just sat there on the floor, holding my mug of cold coffee, staring at the door. 3 knocks, slow, measured, like whoever it was didn't care if I answered or not. The porch light was out. I hadn't changed the bulb yet, so when I glanced toward the window, it was just blackness pressing against the glass. No shadow, no outline, nothing. I told myself it was a delivery guy who got the wrong address, or some local drunk who wandered too far. Still, my heart was hammering so loud I could feel it in my jaw. Then came another sound. Tap, tap, tap. Not from the door this time, from the wall behind me. The whispering started again, that same low, sibilant sound that didn't quite make sense as words, but still felt aimed at me, like the walls were leaning closer to listen. I grabbed the flashlight from my backpack and pointed it at the wallpaper. The beam caught dust motes swirling in the air, and for half a second I swore the pattern on the wall shifted. The roses seemed to move, like they were turning toward the sound. And then it stopped. Everything went perfectly still. No wind, no radiator hiss, not even the faint hum of the fridge. just silence so thick it pressed against my ears. I forced myself to check the door, partly to prove there was nothing there, partly because the alternative was sitting frozen in the dark. When I finally opened it, the cold hit me first, sharp enough to sting my eyes. The porch was empty. The yard stretched out in pale moonlight, quiet and clean. No footprints in the frost. But on the doorframe, just above the handle, I noticed something. Someone, or something, had drawn a small symbol there in charcoal. A circle with 3 vertical lines running through it like a crude trident. I wiped it away with my thumb without thinking. Big mistake. That night, I dreamt I was standing in the same hallway, the peeled wallpaper glowing faintly, the words, "Don't answer when they knock," pulsing like a heartbeat. Only this time there was something inside the wall, pressing from the other side. I could see the bulge moving, stretching the wallpaper like wet skin. And a voice, soft and close to my ear, whispered, "Now you've let it in." The next morning felt wrong before I even opened my eyes. You know that sense, like the air itself is watching you? I could tell it was still early from the blue light coming through the window, but something in the room had shifted. For one, it was cold. Not just chilly, breath-clouding cold, the kind that feels wet in your lungs. My little space heater was off, even though I never unplugged it. When I tried to turn it on again, nothing happened. I made coffee just to have something warm to hold. The kitchen felt smaller somehow, like the walls were leaning in a little closer than before. And every time I looked away, I swore I heard a faint scratching, not from mice or pipes, but higher up, behind the wallpaper near the ceiling, like fingernails tracing something just out of reach. Around noon, I went into town to clear my head. It's a small place. 1 diner, a post office, a hardware store, and a bar that smells like wet wood and cigarettes. I ended up at the diner. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with gray hair tied in a bun, asked if I was the new owner of the Moore place. When I nodded, she paused mid-pour, like the coffee pot got heavier all of a sudden. "You didn't move in yet, did you?" I told her I had. She just nuttered, "Should have waited till spring," and walked away without another word. By the time I got back to the house, the light was already fading. The temperature had dropped again, colder inside than it was outside. When I went to check the circuit breaker, I found something I swear hadn't been there before. On the inside of the electrical panel, scratched into the metal with something sharp, were the same 3 vertical lines from the door, that trident shape. Only this time, the circle around them was closed, complete. That night, I decided to stay awake. I lit a candle, made some tea, and sat in the living room with the flashlight beside me. The wind picked up around midnight, rattling the windows. Then, faint at first, but growing clearer, the whispering started again. It wasn't just 2 voices this time. There were 3. They weren't words exactly, more like breath moving through broken instruments. I leaned closer, straining to hear, when something moved in the corner of my eye. The candle flame bent sharply, almost sideways, and the wallpaper on the far wall rippled just once, like something had brushed against it from behind. Then came the knocks. 3, slow, deliberate. Same as before, but this time they didn't come from the front door. They came from inside the house. The sound came from the upstairs hallway, sharp, hollow, wood on wood, like someone knocking on a door that wasn't there. I froze, listening. 3 knocks, then silence, then faintly the sound of something dragging. I grabbed the flashlight and went to the stairs, heart thudding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. Each step creaked like a warning. The air grew heavier the higher I went, like walking into deep water. At the top, the hallway stretched out ahead of me, long and narrow, lined with closed doors. The floorboards bowed slightly in the middle, and the wallpaper was peeling in places, layers of it, curling like old skin. The dragging sound stopped when I stepped off the last stair. That's when I noticed it. The door to the far left room, the one I hadn't opened since moving in, was standing slightly ajar. "Hello?" I said, immediately hating how thin my voice sounded. Nothing. Just the faint hum of the house breathing. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first, cold dust, damp wood, and something faintly metallic, like old blood. The room was empty except for a single rocking chair by the window, facing the wall. It rocked slowly back and forth, though there was no wind. My flashlight flickered. There was writing on the wall behind the chair, carved deep into the plaster. I moved closer, careful not to touch anything. The letters were jagged, uneven, like someone had written them in the dark. "It doesn't knock twice." The chair stopped moving. That was all it took for me to back out of the room. I closed the door, maybe harder than I meant to, and half ran down the stairs. I sat at the bottom, trying to slow my breathing, hands shaking so bad I almost dropped the flashlight. When I looked down at my wrist, I saw something that made my stomach turn. 3 thin vertical smudges of charcoal, the same trident symbol, pressed into my skin like fingerprints. I scrubbed them off with soap until my skin turned red, but faint gray lines still lingered beneath the surface, like the mark wasn't on my skin at all, like it was under it. That night, I locked every door and window, turned on all the lights, and slept on the couch with the flashlight in my hand. Around 3 a.m., I woke to a sound that didn't belong. A soft creak from the upstairs floorboards. Then another. Then the unmistakable rhythm of slow, bare footsteps. They stopped right above me. The footsteps paused directly over the couch where I was lying. For a few seconds, I didn't even breathe. The house was so still that I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. Then, one more step, a slow, deliberate creak. I turned the flashlight toward the ceiling like that thin beam of light could somehow protect me. The floorboards above groaned again, just once, and then nothing. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the sound. I waited maybe a full minute before I got up. Every muscle in my body screamed, "Don't," but I couldn't just lie there. I needed to see. I climbed the stairs slowly, the wood cold against my bare feet. The hallway was darker than before, almost unnaturally so. The flashlight beam seemed to thin out in it, like fog swallowing the light. When I reached the top, the air smelled faintly of smoke. The same room from last night, the one with the writing on the wall, was open again. Not just ajar this time, wide open. I should have turned back. I really should have. But I stepped inside. The rocking chair was still there, perfectly still now. The window was cracked open, the curtains swaying gently even though there was no wind. And on the floor beneath the window, something had been arranged. Small piles of ash in a deliberate pattern, 3 lines, then a circle connecting them. The same symbol. The flashlight flickered again. My hand was shaking so bad I almost dropped it. And that's when I heard the whispering again, only this time it was clear. A woman's voice right behind me, whispering in a tone so calm it froze me in place. "You shouldn't have answered." The light went out completely. I swear I felt fingers, cold, damp, real, brush against the back of my neck. I bolted, nearly tripped down the stairs, hit my shin on the railing, didn't stop until I was outside in the yard, barefoot in the frost. My breath fogged the air, and every window of the house was glowing with a faint, unnatural light, like candlelight moving from room to room. I stood there until sunrise, just watching. The light finally faded around dawn, leaving the house still and empty again, like it hadn't just tried to whisper in my ear. When I went back inside that morning, everything looked normal, except for one thing. The front door, which I had locked the night before, was standing open, and written across it, in faint, uneven charcoal letters, were 5 words. "Now it knows your name." I didn't sleep for the next 2 nights. I tried, I really did. But every time I closed my eyes, I'd see that glow moving through the windows, hear that whispering just behind the walls. It wasn't words anymore, just breath, like the house itself was breathing slow and heavy in the dark. By the 3rd morning, I was a wreck. Coffee couldn't keep me awake, and the lines on my wrist, the faint gray marks I'd tried to scrub off, had darkened. They weren't bruises. They looked more like ink bleeding beneath the skin, slowly spreading. That's when I decided to get out. I packed my bag, shoved it into the back seat, and started the car. Except the engine didn't even try to turn over. Just a dull click, like the battery was dead. I tried again. Nothing. When I got out to check, I noticed something odd. The frost on the car windows was inside, not on the glass surface, but trapped between the layers, forming patterns that looked like the wallpaper inside the house, roses and vines twisting together. I walked back to the porch, half ready to smash a window just to get my stuff and go. That's when I saw them. Footprints. Bare, leading from the tree line straight to the porch steps. They were small, too small for a man, maybe a woman's or a child's, and they stopped right in front of the door. But there weren't any prints leading away. Inside, the air was different, heavier, still. Even the floorboards didn't creak under my weight anymore. The silence was so deep it made my ears ring. The door to the upstairs hallway was open again, and on the first step, sitting perfectly centered, was a small object, a key, old-fashioned, iron, blackened with age. I picked it up without thinking, and the moment my fingers touched it, I heard a sound from above. Tap, tap, tap. Not the walls this time, the ceiling, right above me. And then a voice, faint, hollow, not whispering now, but speaking clearly. A woman's voice again, distant, but echoing through the whole house. "You opened the wrong door." The key was burning hot in my hand. I dropped it, but it didn't hit the floor. It just vanished, like it fell through the air and kept falling forever. That's when I realized something else. I wasn't hearing the voice from the ceiling anymore. I was hearing it from inside my head. It said my name, slowly, clearly, and it didn't sound like a whisper anymore. It sounded like someone standing right behind me. I didn't turn around. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to, but I couldn't. I felt the air move behind me, like someone had exhaled against the back of my neck. When I finally did look, there was no one there. Just the hallway, stretching away into the same quiet dark. But something was different. The light through the windows had changed. It looked dimmer, like the world outside had thickened, gone cloudy. I grabbed my jacket and ran for the front door. Except the doorknob was ice cold, and when I pulled, it didn't move. Not even a rattle. The keyhole was gone, just smooth metal where it used to be. I started shouting, pounding on the door, yelling for help, but no sound came out of my mouth, not a single one. My throat moved, my breath caught, but there was nothing, just silence, the kind that hums in your skull. Then, light, a sudden flash from upstairs, warm, flickering like a candle. I turned, and for the first time I noticed the wallpaper wasn't flat anymore. It bulged in certain spots, like something was pressing from underneath. Tiny tremors ran through it, as if the house was breathing faster now. I moved toward the stairs without deciding to. My feet just went. Every step groaned, but under each creak I heard a faint whisper of laughter. It wasn't malicious exactly, just wrong. Childlike, but hollow, echoing like it came from deep underground. At the top, the door to the rocking chair room stood open again. The candlelight came from inside, soft and golden. I stepped closer, peered through the crack. There was a figure in the chair, small, thin, shoulders hunched, long black hair hanging forward so I couldn't see her face. Her hands rested on her knees, gray like stone. "Hello?" I said, or tried to. My voice came out cracked and distant, like I was hearing it through water. The figure turned its head toward me, slow and stiff. The hair fell away just enough to show a sliver of face, skin the color of paper, and eyes that were wrong. Completely black, but glimmering, like something was moving behind them. And then she smiled. Not a big grin, just a tiny twitching curl at the corner of her mouth. The candle went out. I don't remember running. I just remember the sound of my own footsteps slamming down the stairs, the front door finally giving way when I hit it with my shoulder, and the freezing air flooding in. I didn't stop until I was halfway down the road, barefoot again, lungs burning. When I looked back, the house windows glowed faintly. Not candlelight this time, something colder. And standing on the porch, I could just make out a figure. Still, watching. She wasn't moving, but the door behind her swung slowly open and shut, like the house itself was breathing her name, or maybe mine. I didn't go back right away. I slept, or tried to, in my car at the edge of town, engine off, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like damp upholstery. Every time I started to drift off, I'd hear it, a faint, hollow knock from somewhere outside, always 3 times, never more. By morning, I looked like hell. My eyes were bloodshot, hands trembling so bad I could barely hold the coffee I bought from the gas station. I told myself I'd drive until I hit another state, leave everything, the house, the boxes, my clothes behind. Except the gas gauge read empty. I'd filled the tank 2 days earlier. When I opened the door to check, the smell hit me, That same sickly sweet rot from inside the house. The car's interior reeked of it. And on the inside of the windshield, written in streaks of ash or charcoal, were 5 words. You can't leave it now. I slammed the door, backed away, heart hammering. A woman walking her dog down the street gave me a strange look, like she could tell I'd seen something I shouldn't have. That's when I realized I had no keys in my hand. No jacket, no phone. I'd left everything inside the house. So, against every shred of common sense, I went back. The house looked different in daylight. Smaller, almost pitiful, like an old animal too tired to keep pretending to be dangerous. But the air around it felt off, thick, heavy. The trees behind it stood unnaturally still. No breeze, no birds. The front door was wide open. I didn't leave it like that. I know I didn't. Inside, it was quiet. The kind of quiet you get in church right before a funeral starts. Dust motes floated in the sunlight. But the air smelled clean. No rot, no damp. I thought, maybe stupidly, that it was over. Maybe I had imagined more than I remembered. Then I saw the footprints, bare, small, and black with soot, leading from the base of the stairs to the kitchen. I followed. The footprints stopped right in front of the refrigerator. The door was slightly open, and cold air spilled out in little white ribbons. Inside was nothing but frost, and one thing I hadn't put there: a glass jar. I lifted it out carefully. Something floated in the cloudy water inside, a piece of paper, folded tight. When I opened it, the ink had bled, but I could still make out the words. You can't leave it now. And beneath that, my own name, written in my handwriting. The fridge door creaked shut behind me, and from the hallway I heard the soft scrape of a chair being pulled across the floorboards upstairs. The sound of the chair scraping across the floor hit me like a pulse, long, slow, dragging. I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, still holding that damn jar, watching the stairwell like something was about to lean over the railing and look right at me. When it didn't, I forced myself to move. My legs felt rubbery, disconnected, but I climbed the steps anyway. Every creak of wood under my feet echoed too long, like the house was repeating it back to me. At the top, the door to the room, the rocking chair room, was half open again. The smell was worse than before, not rot exactly, more like old iron and wet earth. I pushed the door open. The chair was turned toward me now. Sitting in it was the woman, the same one I'd seen before. Only she wasn't just there. She was clearer, solid. Her long black hair dripped water onto the floor, each drop leaving a dark spot that didn't fade. Her head tilted slightly to the side, like she was curious about me. "Why are you here?" I asked, though it came out more like a breath than words. Her mouth moved, but her voice didn't come from her lips. It came from the walls. Every surface around me seemed to murmur the same phrase over and over. "You said yes." "I didn't. I never—" The house groaned. The wallpaper began to peel upward in strips, curling like fingers. Beneath it, the plaster pulsed, faint and wet, like something breathing inside the walls. The woman stood, slow and fluid, her feet leaving black, wet marks on the wood. "You did," the voice said again, from everywhere, from inside me. The air thickened until I could barely breathe, my ears filled with a deep, rhythmic thudding, like a heartbeat but wrong, off-tempo. And then the room changed. The window vanished. The doorway behind me was gone. I spun around and saw nothing but walls, the same floral pattern repeating endlessly. She moved closer. The black of her eyes wasn't color. It was absence, like holes torn in fabric. I stumbled backward until my spine hit something soft, the wallpaper, and it moved. It rippled under my touch, warm and alive. "You let it in," she whispered, her voice almost gentle now. "Now it needs a name to stay." And then she reached for me. Her fingers were cold, but soft, too soft, and when they touched my face, I saw something impossible. Her reflection, not in a mirror, but in the glass of her eyes, was me. And I wasn't standing where I thought I was. I was sitting in the chair. She smiled, and everything went black. When I woke up, it was morning again. Pale light spilled across the floorboards, soft and gold, and for a second, everything looked normal. The air was still. No whispers, no smell, just quiet. Then I realized I couldn't move. My head lolled to the side, stiff. My hands rested on my knees. My body felt heavy, like I'd been sitting there for days. I tried to stand, but my muscles didn't listen. My skin felt strange, tighter somehow, and when I looked down, the sleeves of my shirt were damp, streaked with black water. The rocking chair creaked under my weight. Back and forth, back and forth. I blinked hard, trying to clear my vision, but the world around me seemed wrong. The corners of the room were darker than they should have been, the light from the window too dim, like sunlight trying to push through deep water. Then I heard footsteps. Someone was in the house. Heavy boots on the porch, then the slow whine of the front door opening. I wanted to shout, to warn them, to tell them to leave, but when I opened my mouth, no sound came out. The footsteps moved through the hallway, careful, hesitant. I could hear a man's voice muttering to himself. "Hello? Realtor said someone might be here." His voice grew louder as he climbed the stairs. I wanted to scream, "Don't come up here, please!" But all I could do was sit there, rocking slowly, my breath coming out in short, useless bursts. When he stepped into the doorway, the light from his flashlight cut through the gloom. He froze. "Jesus," he whispered. "Didn't know anyone was—" He stopped mid-sentence. I saw what he saw. The wallpaper behind me had changed again. Not just peeling now, it was alive. Faces pressed against it from the other side, eyes open and moving beneath the paper. Their mouths opened and closed, whispering something too soft to hear. The man stumbled back. "What the—" The whispering swelled, louder, a chorus of breath and broken words. The wallpaper pulsed once, hard, and the faces vanished. The walls went still. Then I heard it. 3 soft knocks, echoing through the house. The man turned toward the sound. "Is someone else here?" My throat burned. I pushed with everything I had, forcing the air through my chest, trying to make a sound, any sound. The words scraped out of me like glass. "Don't answer!" But it was too late. He turned the knob. The door swung open to nothing but darkness, deeper than night. A cold gust hit the room, carrying that familiar scent, damp wood, rotted fruit, and something else underneath. Me. The land's flashlight flickered. In the split second before it went out, I saw my reflection in the window. It wasn't me sitting there anymore. It was her, the woman from the walls. Same hair, same eyes. And behind her reflection, behind mine, something moved. When the light died, the whispers returned. Soft, rhythmic, almost conversational. The house was awake again. And somewhere downstairs, the front door slowly closed. 3 knocks.